Check them out, let me know when you got that.
On that ridge line, if they just passed over. Gun just passed over. Set to it, did we see?
After an interview, I was accepted into the program and was told, go back to your unit, we'll call you shortly and we'll have you report out to the station that you're going to. And I said, fine. So I went back all excited and I waited and I waited and I waited and nothing happened. There was no request. So the next time I flew an airplane into Benoit, which was where the headquarters was that I'd done the interview, I ran over the other side of the base and said, I'm Lieutenant Deering. What's happened? Why have you not called me? And they said, didn't you get the message? And I hate it when people say that. And I said, no. They said, we tried to call you 3 times on the radio, on the HF radio, which was the only way we communicated. Since you didn't respond, we took the number 2 guy on the list. But you can go, be the next one. Well, I said, okay, fine. Went back to the unit, and it wasn't more than a few days. And I received a call. It said, pack your bags. And at Vientiane, I was able to take the Jeep down to the embassy where I met my new boss, Lieutenant Colonel Bob Foster, who was probably one of the finest Air Force officers I have ever met. I said, can I ask a question? And I said, well, I explained what had happened and how I was supposed to come, didn't get the message, et cetera, and now I'm late. Leaned back in his chair, took a deep breath, and he said, yes, I can tell you what happened. One of our facts who was getting ready to go home by the name of Hank Allen was within his last couple days of flying. And the new guy came in, Dick Elzinka, who was the man who replaced me. They met, and it was the custom of that time. The old guy checked out the new guy. And as soon as he was qualified, away you go. You're on your own. So he took Dick out on a flight, and they vanished. They totally vanished. Well, it dawned on me then, as a foreshadowing of what was to come, that I ended up replacing the man who replaced me. And had I received that message, I probably wouldn't be here today.
I was there, General Brown, Commander 7th Air Force, later Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, shows up in, I think it was November of '69. We had a little, what was called a map room at our house, and the CIA base chief was going to brief Brown on this offensive. Now, I was standing there in my black flight suit, and another guy, same thing, with our AK-47s. Brown came and kind of looked at us and nodded slightly. Well, thank you. Brown says to the base chief, he says, "Tom, I'm not sure I like lieutenants and captains running their own war." And the base chief looks at him, he says, "Well, George, that's very interesting. We found they're the only people from the Air Force we've met that know what the they're doing." And Brown being, of course, if you're going to be a general, you got to be an ultimate politician. He says, "You might have a point there, Tom."
I was the first Raven picked to check out in the T-28. Well, I finished my local checkout there in Udoy. It came time for me to take the first T-28 up to 20 alternate. The maintenance chief is a Lieutenant Colonel George Vogel. I said, "I'm taking this airplane." And he said, "Listen here, Sonny." I said, "George, I won't call you Papa if you don't call me Sonny." And he said, "George, you calling me George?" I said, "Yeah." And he said, "What are you?" And I said, "Well, you're not cleared to know what I am or who I am." And he said, "Well, that's bullshit. I think you're in the Air Force. And I think you're a captain." And of course, he was right, but I wouldn't flinch, you know. And I said, "No, you're not cleared for that." I said, "George, don't worry about that." He said, "Anyway, I'm taking this airplane." He said, "Look, listen a minute. Here's the rules that you have to follow." He said, "After 10 hours of flight, bring it back. And it's not due back until the 17th. And I said, whoa. That's 9 days from now." He said, "Yes, that's right." And I said, "George, I don't belong to a flying club. You know," and he was used to their aircraft flew 1 hour training missions. And that was his maintenance schedule. And he had a whole flight line full of T-28s. I said, "Okay, I'm not going to argue with this guy." I said, "George, I got to go." So I took the airplane up to 20 alternate and flew it 3 hours the day I got it. The next day, I flew 2 3-hour missions. And the third day, another 3-hour missions. Now I already running out of time after 3 days. And it wasn't due out of maintenance for another 5 days. So I flew the airplane back and brought it into the hangar. And George came out. He said, "Why'd you bring the airplane back?" And I said, "Well, I got a couple bullet holes and the canopy's off the rail here. And you need to fix some stuff. And I ran it out of time." He said, "I told you what the rules is. This is going in the back of the hangar, and you're not getting it back until the 18th. And I said, "Well, I'm not going to argue with this guy." And I already flown a whole day of combat. And I said, "George, see you later." So the next morning, I got up and went out early at dawn. I got out and went out to the flight line, and only the Thai mechanics were on the flight line. And I said, "Where's Colonel Dunlap's airplane?" And Colonel Dunlap was the commander of water pump. He said, "There's a nice shiny one." And I said, "Is it loaded up?" He says, "Yes, it's loaded and gassed up." I took Colonel Dunlap's airplane up to 20 alternate. I knew that the forces that would come crashing down on me. But I flew it again twice a day, 3-hour missions, and it was into the third day before they did a ramp check. My radio operator came in and says, Mike, we're in trouble. I said, no, we're not. He said yeah, they're looking for your airplane. I said, well, it's not my airplane. I said, tell them we have it so they don't think it got shot down. The next message said, would you please return aircraft 679 forthwith? So I said, okay, I'm not going to fight with George anymore, you know. So I waited. The place closes up at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and they all go to the bar at 5 o'clock, exactly, every day. So I brought the airplane back quietly about 5:30. I hopped out of it, dirty. It was full of mud and everything from landing in bad weather. I just jumped up and grabbed the next airplane, and I went up to 20 alternate again and stole the second airplane. And of course, this time they were wise to me. they knew exactly what was going on. The message came, well, would you kindly return the aircraft and disciplinary measurement will be taken. My radio operator was scared to death. He says, they're going to kick your ass, Mike. I said, they can't kick my ass. I don't work for any of them. I'm not in the Air Force. The Air Force told them to give me the airplane. This is a lesson in command relationships. The next day they said, are you going to bring the airplane back? And I said, yes, I will bring the airplane back. And again, I ran it out of time. So this time I came in and I told Udorn Tower, have something hanging off the bottom of the airplane. I need to make a low pass and come in and have you take a look. And the guy knew I was up to something. He said, okay, there's nothing else in the pattern. You are cleared a low pass. So I lined the aircraft right over George's office. It was in the second floor of the hangar. And I came over and I buzzed his office with the wheels almost touching the roof. I shook the windows on the maintenance hangar and pitched the airplane up and come around. And there George was standing with his hands on his hips on the top of the stairway. So I came around and I said, well, we'll just do this right. And he was standing on the wooden stairway, and I put the wingtip right in front of the staircase. And he walked down that staircase like a peacock. He walked across the wing, and I was waiting for him to give me a blast. And he saluted me, and he said, sir, I am duty bound to give you what aircraft you need whenever you need it. I am at your service. I said, George, I think we understand each other. I said, what happened? He said, well, I finally got instructed to what you guys do. He says, everything's such a big secret. I didn't know what your mission is and what you go through. He said, from now on, you come to me and I'll give you whatever aircraft you need when you need it. If you fly 10 hours a day, I'll support you. That was it. And we became the best of friends. We saw each other even after he retired.
Intensity of the battle anywhere in Laos depended on the weather there, the seasons, and also upon the North Vietnamese. At the time I was there, which was after the Easter Offensive started, the South became very important and a very hot zone. For obvious reasons, the trail became extremely important as it was feeding all three of their main conflict zones during the Easter Offensive. It all ran through our AO, or our area of operation. So we became extremely hot at the time. Now, I got there in August of '72 and stayed until after the war was over. But of that time, 6 months of it was actual active flying. Normal strength at Pak Se was 4 Ravens, that's all. And during my time, there were 10 Ravens assigned to Pak Se in those 4 slots, depending on the time you were there. And of those, we had Raven 40, Jim Yeager, was shot down right after I got there. Jay Johnston and John Rhodes were stationed there. I was there, was shot down, recovered, and force landed 2 more times. Mike Stearns replaced Jim Yeager after he was shot down, and then Mike Stearns had a crash landing, was recovered and hospitalized for 6 months. Hal Mishler replaced Mike Stearns. He was shot down and killed in action. Jack Shaw was riding with me during Hal Mishler's SAR. He was shot down and recovered. And then we had Carl Gibble, Dave Elliott, and Charlie Brewer came in towards the end of the conflict, and they managed to escape unscathed. You could add to that 2 of our best Lao backseaters, Ponti and Kaman, were both shot down and killed in action. One was shot down with Hal Mishler when he was shot down. The other was shot down with one of our Nakatan FACs. This is a Laotian FAC who's a T-28 flight lead who we qualified in the 01 and used him to direct airstrikes with the Laotian Air Force. The one that was shot down and killed was Rasasi Shithat. He's a famous personality in the Vietnam War. He was famous with American fighter pilots as well as the FACs that worked with him. And when he was shot down, it was such a big deal, the ambassador came down for the funeral.
When you're in a position like the Hmong are, there are no replacements. When you lose somebody, especially if he's one of the lieutenants, one of the majors, one of your good sergeants, you're going to replace him with a 13-year-old, maybe a 14-year-old if we're lucky. Seeing these kids, going out to battle with an M16 in their hand and being, just about the same height as the M16 was really heartbreaking. The Hmong nation, or what part of it Vang Pao had access to, was bleeding to death, was being bled to the bone right there during that time, and that's 67.
We had pilots that were primarily in T-28s. They were outstanding. They had a motto, fly till you die. I think that the high T-28 Hmong pilot, he would ask, what side of the bunker do you want to hit? And he would hit it.
He was using air power to keep and hold ground. And of course, it's impossible, but that's what we tried to do. Fly till you die. They weren't getting an assignment to Florida. The only assignment they had was combat until you die. Of course, they're fighting for their own country.
I was at Longchen longer than any other Raven, and it was because of a glitch in the personnel system. As time went on, I became more and more tense. I was unable to recover from day to day with all the pressure that was on. And I became very discouraged because it looked like the American government was not coming up with a solution. In other words, how do we win this war? We lost 8 Ravens while I was there. We lost several Lao and Hmong backseaters, pilots, all kinds. Plus, that isn't even including the soldiers, of course. I had a discussion with one of my Hmong friends. I was expressing myself and saying, why aren't you taking that hill? Why aren't you going out and handling it? He says, in a couple of months, you're going to go home and you won't have to do this anymore. We take the hill, we lose the hill. We take the hill, we lose the hill, and eventually I get killed. And he says, that's the way it is over here. I was shocked with the reality of what was happening. So it was just a matter of time, and they all knew they were all going to die if the war didn't stop.
These guys flew 8-9 sorties a day. Their preferred dive angle was 90 degrees, which can make you very accurate.
Right on target.
When you're doing that every day, you get to be pretty damned expert at it. The Hmong pilots' motto was fly until you die. Of the 8 Hmong T-28 pilots that were there when I arrived, one survived. And they knew they were going to die.
Lilu was an amazing combat pilot who flew at least 6 missions a day. It'd be 5 of his guys. They would load up and go after the enemy like a horde of bees and attack a target, go back, load up, go again. Back and forth, back and forth. Some of the missions were less than an hour. They had to load their own bombs. Lilu was a hero, and he must have had 5,000 hours of combat. One of the new pilots came in, and the guy still had on a long sleeve white shirt, and I saw him get in the airplane. Lilu got on the radio and was instructing this guy in Wong language. He was telling him what's going on, and he did nothing but nonstop instruction. And so he's flying over Mount Sui. I'm yelling at him. I said, Lilu, you're low, you're slow, you're low, you're slow. And he couldn't hear me. ZPUs cut him in half and killed the 2 pilots and threw Bang Pao into depression because he loved his son-in-law. And of course, he was the heart and soul of the Laotian Air Force. And so it really knocked us down morale-wise.
I'd just been checked out in the T-28. I was out at the Plain of Jars, and I got a call from Showboat. He was at Site 32, which is the northernmost site we work, north of PDJ. So en route, they told me they were taking fire from across the valley. So when I got there, I realized they had a 2-man gun crew across the valley on a ridgeback, I'd call it, a very steep-sided crest. And the 2 guys had dug a pretty good-sized foxhole kind of position in there. Had a DK-82 in there, which looks like a recoilless rifle. It fires about an 82 millimeter rocket. It's like a rocket propelled grenade, direct fire. And they were firing across the valley into Site 32. So as I circled over, I could see the 2 people in there. They didn't track me with the gun, so the DK-82 really isn't an aircraft weapon. So that's all they had to fire, so I was confident in that. About the same time, I got a call from Cricket, the Airborne Command Post, that they had a Tiger 06 available. Tiger's call sign was a fastback, F4 fastback, and they go out sometimes North Vietnam, sometimes in the hottest routes in Laos, and fly about 200 feet off the ground at the speed of heat looking for targets. So at the end of his mission, he's on the way home, had some ammo not expended, but he was low on gas and wanted to, try for a target. Well, this is a pretty tough target, but send him over and we'll see what we can do. Well, he came on over. I was able to hit the target with my smoke. I set him up on a north-south run. The way the ridgeback was set up, I figured this is the only real chance he could get some bullets in the hole. We had 20 millimeter. So we set him up. He got in the right-hand pattern so he wouldn't overfly the friendlies. Came around for his first run and shot, and sure enough, it missed halfway down the hill. So once you miss a target like that on a ridgeback, you miss it by an inch, you miss it by a mile. So I said, well, that's not too good. I'm showing gas. Let's try it one more time. He said, okay. So we kind of set up in almost a training range pattern. So we pulled up, came up with the same run-in heading again. And I got close to that time. The dust cleared, but he still didn't have any bullets in the hole. I was low on gas. I said, I think it's time to go, and we'll try to get this guy later. He said, no, I'll give it one more pass. We set up on the same pattern again, coming in from the north. He missed the target again. So he pulls up, and in a less than typical tone of voice says, "Raven, Raven, I was hit." So he had pulled off the target and was in a 90-degree bank by the time I saw him, and both pilots punched out. F4's got 2 pilots. I got over there in a minute or so and was able to circle the 2 pilots in parachutes as they came down. Again, I was low on gas. I had another Raven inbound, Stan Erstead, and he got on the scene with me. And again, we were able to identify where the pilot set down, which pilot had, one of the pilots had about a third of his chute gone due to fire, I guess, with his ejection system. So I was able to hand it off to Stan, and with the help of the Air America folks, he was able to pick up the people really quickly and get back to 20 Alton about the same time, a little bit later than when I was able to touch down. Unfortunately, we lost the airplane, but I also learned a lesson there. It was an old lesson relearned, and that you don't want to let a crew or aircraft come in 3 times on the same heading. Even though that was the optimum heading, we should have mixed it up a little bit. It was not a great day, but we saved the crew, which is the most important thing. I came back later that same day, and the 2 gunners were gone, so I guess at least we scared them out of that hole. We got to fly another day.
So 6 days after I got my checkout, this new guy shows up, and he'd been down in 4 Corps in Vietnam, where I think they got 1 mountain. This guy's name was. So I started, getting into talking about the way things are different, and this wasn't Vietnam. It's a wholly different world, and blah, blah, blah. And he actually said, "I'm a captain and you're only a lieutenant." I thought, uh-oh, this guy's problem. So what I warned him about was, yeah, there's a lot of small arms fire here, but there's machine guns everywhere. There's 37 millimeter in many places. I said, you got to constantly jink, just gentle jinking. Don't get near the tops of ridge lines, of which there are many, because in Vietnam, I got caught in a mountain wave effect thing, which is like a tunnel of air. And if you try to pull out of it, it'll smash you into the ground. You just ride it out. I said, but don't get near the tops of ridges. He just looked at me like, okay. So I checked him out, gave him the 1-day checkout. 6 days later, Dinh Quang, the NVA occupied province capital, there was General Vang Pao was upslope from there with some Hmong troops and Burr Smith, who was a CIA case officer, a legend. Bach made 3 straight passes over the town. And I'm sure the first 2 passes, the Vietnamese probably said, there's got to be a trick here. Nobody could be this stupid. 3rd pass, they blew him out of the sky. And of course, he had a backseater with him. And so they hit the several rounds into the 01. So then I'm the second guy to show up. It took an hour and a half to kill the guns.
Set 2, receiving fire. There's no more on the list. This is Dragon 2-0. We got a crossfire back there, I think.
Ye Ka is a Chapakao Hmong T-28 pilot who survived the war, escaping Laos with his family in 1975 and now lives in the U.S. I was blessed to travel with him and Raven 27 Craig Goering and their wives in Laos in 2015. Ye was first a backseater to the Ravens for 15 months with a minimum of 1,256 missions. Then he became a Chapakao T-28 pilot in 1973 and finally a personal pilot for 6 months to Vang Pao, flying 3 different aircraft. Being a backseater gave the Hmong in Laos invaluable experience for later when they became pilots. Ye crash-landed at least once, while the backseater for Raven 23 Park Bunker, who himself was later shot down and killed on December 30, 1970. Bunker was not retrieved, nor were his remains ever found.
I've become a backseat for the Raven. It's a very, very dangerous position, very dangerous. Especially those Raven, they're young people. They're very young. They're not afraid nothing either. So every time I flew with a new Raven, all my warning and yelling so many times. That's why I usually do it. You go down there, enemy territory, you fly very low. They fly very low. They try to use the eyeball to look at, under the tree, the bush, sometimes they will see something. That's what they plan to do it. And you think you sit with those guys, you're scared, man. You're scared. I feel like my ass itchy. And I was gonna get hit. But we got hit so many times. We hit so many times. I knew that one time I almost got killed. I almost got killed with one bullet. I never got hit one in the front, but most is right below me. And that's why I keep thinking those bad guys don't know how to shoot. Pop Uncle and me was a guy. He flew one time. We crashed at the top of the mountain too. I don't know. One day, just before he died, he keep flying very low. It's unusual. It's usually unusual that he did that. And this time, why do you flew so low? I kind of warning him. I said, "Hey, Pop, you fly too low. We're not gonna make the ridge, the mountain. You're not gonna make it. Can you go around one time before you go?" He said, "No, we make it." He said, always say, "We make it. We make it." I said, "No, never. The mountain is higher than us. We are too low. Can you turn around, do one more time before you go?" He said, "You will make it." And then the second time I talked to him, I said, "You're not gonna make it. Turn around now." He said, "Well, when we get closer, I will turn." When we get closer, we got turbulent. They just push the airplane down. And the two front wheels hit the ground, flip over. We flip over the top of the hill, and we both survived. But if we pass about 50 feet away, about 50 feet more, we've died because there's a really deep hill and a rod on the other side. But we lay on top, so we survived.
My specialty was finding storage areas, trucks hidden along the Ho Chi Minh Trail, leading up to and on the Bolivans Plateau. My best friend over there was actually an agency guy, Jim Lewis, call sign Sword, and he's the one I partied around with most. One day, Jim Lewis took back the town of Pak Son up on the Bolivans Plateau from the NVA. He was a battalion. He was originally a Green Beret in Vietnam, and was working for the agency and was a battalion commander. The battalion were Thais. So he took back the town from the NVA, and I landed my bird dog on the road outside town and walked through the town with Jim. Anyway, I was replacing Lloyd Duncan, who got his leg almost shot off, and I inherited his backseater, Ponte. He was, they said, instrumental in saving Lloyd's life, and he was a great backseater with me. We always flew together. Some of the other Ravens said that when Lloyd was shot down, he couldn't hardly move or get out of the airplane, and Ponte pulled him out and stood by him while they waited for the Air America helicopters to come in and rescue him. And pretty dicey. And that's the rescue we had was from the Air America helicopters. When I did that landing outside of Pak Son, one of the Air America helicopters came in and landed right behind me, asking if I was in trouble and needed help. So they were great. Ponte got killed. I heard he was killed with a couple other of the backseaters, the Laotians. There was one time with Ponte when we were bombing a town. We didn't usually do that, but there was a chieftain on the ground that wanted us to bomb a section of the town where there was a big munitions stockpile. And Ponte was in contact with him, coordinating those bombs, making sure that we hit the right place. I was also firing out the side of my O1 with an AR-15, dueling with a guy on the ground. That was the only time I took a bullet hole in the airplane, was dueling with that guy on the ground.
One time I was over at the CIA headquarters and there was a sort of a bustle going on. And I asked the CIA guy, what's going on? He said, Vang Pao had been wounded in the arm and he still had a bullet in there. And he said, Vang Pao's going to get this sucked out today. And I said, what? He said, you want to come? I said, yeah. So I went down there to Vang Pao's house and he was seated on a stool with just a undershirt on. And this sort of raunchy looking guy came in and squatted down by his injured arm. His arm always hung sort of loose. This guy started chanting and going on and on about, I don't know, whatever. He had this rattle that was shaped like a donut. And he would peer through that at Vang Pao's wound every now and then. Then he would shake it and then peer through it again. And this went on for about 10 minutes. Finally, he put that down and he grabbed Vang Pao's arm and latched onto it and sucked. And Vang Pao winced. And so then he spit into the dish and nothing. He did that about 3 times. And the third time, out came what looked like an AK-47 bullet. And it looked like you'd taken a small axe and chopped the tip off. So he probably had it in his mouth. And so Vang Pao made a little speech and said, if you have done this, you will be the Surgeon General of my entire army. And so this guy was all pleased and got up and marched out. And also in the room were surrounding Vang Pao's staff, all his senior colonels and staff officers and everything. And so after they left, I turned to the CIA guy and I said, do they really believe this BS? And he goes, no, he said, Vang Pao doesn't. He said, but a lot of his officers do. And so he said, he has to go through this to appease them. I said, well, what happens now? He says, we're going to put him on a chopper, send him to Eudor and get it operated on, get it out. And so...
When I was doing my checkout mission with Spike, we took a couple hits in the airplane, AK-47 fire and also 12.7 millimeter machine gun fire. It was a dangerous area. When you're putting in the airstrikes, there's no such thing as friendly fire. There's no such thing as a friendly airstrike. When we drop those bombs down there, bombs don't care who they kill. On many occasions, we would actually have special elements of Vang Pao's troops up doing interdiction type missions themselves, and they would point out targets to us, and so we could be very destructive that way. I got to know one of the young Hmong pilots, a guy by the name of Zhang Li Tu, and I owe him a great deal. In fact, I have to honestly say that he saved my ass one day. I was up on the PDJ, up in the northeast corner, looking for interdiction targets, and there were quite a number of anti-aircraft guns up there. And it was not unusual for us in our little O1s to see certainly ground fire from AK-47s. You wouldn't see it, but you could, if it hit the airplane, you'd know it. But you could see the 12.7, you could see the 23 millimeter, you could see the ZPUs, the 14.5 millimeters. And this one day, I was up there looking for targets in the northeast corner of the PDJ when a 37 millimeter gun came up on me. And he fired his shells, and I think they were 5-round clips, and you could see the very distinctive airburst coming up. And this guy was just hosing me and hosing me. And you can't go anywhere very fast in an 01. And so I'm doing my best to kind of jink out of the area. Nokatan 502, Zhang Li Tu, calls me and said, hey, 25, where are you? What are you doing? And I said, hey, buddy, I need some help up here. He said, what's the matter? And I said, this gun's hosing me and he won't let me go. And he said, well, where are you? So I told him, and he was a little bit further to the north from me. And sure enough, he comes down, bless his heart, but he sees that gun firing at me, and he rolls in and he fires 2 rockets, which actually hit that gun. Now, the Willie Pete rockets, they're designed to give you a big white puff of smoke, but they're also explosive warheads, and I think undoubtedly he certainly scared the hell out of the crew because they stopped shooting at me, number one. And secondly, he probably damaged, maybe even killed that gun because, again, that's an explosive warhead. And you hit a gun like that, and you're going to do some damage to it. So I literally give him credit for saving my ass there that day.
The North Vietnamese used this system where they would stage every 20 kilometers or so, they would have a truck park. There was a great emphasis on finding the truck parks. Yuvong Lee, the Indian reconnaissance teams were great. They always had a truck park.
On the right is Yu Va Li, nicknamed the Indian, the leader of the Hmong unit at LS-36. CIA officers Mike Lynch and Jerry Daniels nicknamed Lee the Indian for use over radio. This picture was taken at LS-36 looking south with the runway, degree orientation 0725, in the background. The guy on the left is Scar, one of the original Robins, who flew as backseaters with the Ravens.
So I went up there by myself. I met Bagg, who was the CIA guy up there, and he introduced me to the Indian. The Indian was just the best, toughest soldier that I ever met. What a combat commander. He ran Nakong, Lima Site 36, as the strong point in extreme northern Laos. He was a relative of Vang Pao's. As we made our initial pass over the town, Yuva Lee riding in my right seat, he started talking. And I'm saying, what's wrong? I mean, he's obviously disturbed, and he's really upset. He has lost all his English words, and I think all his French words. He is just really upset and irate. So I go ahead and land, and I'm rolling out down the runway, and he opens the door, and I said, no, and almost grab him. But by the time we'd slowed down to 20 miles an hour or so, he had his foot out on the little stoop there. Well, I'm trying to control the airplane. I lost my hold of him. About 15 miles an hour, he's out of the aircraft and on this runway. I've described this runway. It was not paved in those days. If you'd hit on a nice asphalt runway, it might be comfortable. But this is a mixture of karst chips and clay, and it's just really nasty. It tore up our tires like crazy, and I know it tore him up. He's got his M16 with him. Did a couple of rolls and comes out of it, and he starts across the field. He's heading for a construction thing that's going on the northeast side of town. And there's a bulldozer operator up there. In fact, there's several Thai construction people doing maintenance stuff up there. He's off the runway and into the first field, and just cleaned the bulldozer driver right off the seat of that bulldozer. Turned out that the bulldozer driver had gotten his machine out into a old cemetery. The bulldozer had bulldozed some of them. It turned out that the bulldozer happened to get his wife's. His wife had died in childbirth. Well, that was the value of life, and you settle it with a gun in that area.
Took off early morning out of Vientiane, flew a mission around the Plain of Jars, and in the morning you can hopefully surprise someone. You can fly a little lower than maybe you normally would, at least I did, and search for good targets. But then you turn around and come back to alternate, and typically you pick up a backseater. So I turned around, came back, landed, and I was going to pick up my backseater, call sign Robin 06. Turns out Robin had been in that area, grown up in Long Tien, joined the Army in Long Tien. Now here he was flying with me out of Long Tien. Prepared him to get in the airplane. Well, the Yankee seat has several straps and lap belts you have to connect, and they weren't all on the airplane that day for some reason. So I made an uncommonly good decision and decided he shouldn't go with me that day. So I left him behind and took off on my second mission on my own, which was, again, not that unusual. So I went my normal patrol area, hit two of the different sites out there, usually check in with them. They would have an American advisor there. After a while, I found a couple moving targets, tried to hit them, and then I came back by myself. I was about approaching the southern edge of the PDJ, Plain of Jars, when I started hearing explosions in the airplane. A little unusual, of course. I started getting smoke in there to the point where it was getting hard to see the engine instruments. As I proceeded on, the smoke got worse. Couldn't tell where the explosions were coming from. I just assumed they were from the engine. Turns out that 50 caliber in my left wing was exploding. And that probably caused the aileron controls to break. So I realized suddenly I had no more aileron control. So I was still straight and level, but at that point I decided, well, John, I guess it's time to go. So I called the Airborne Command Post and said, listen, I got this list of problems and I'm going to bail out here, and gave him my position. So the proper sequence to bail out is to assume a position, reach down, pull a cord between your legs, which starts the sequence. So I did all that, pull the cord, and it's like the 4th of July, squibs go off, it blows a hole in your canopy, and rocket leaves. Well, this time the rocket left without me, so there I am sitting in a smoking hole, wondering what to do next. So I said, well, there's a manual release, so I reached down and did that on the right side of the seat. You pull up a lever. But since this was a pretty unusual configuration, I decided to stand up in the seat, move around, make sure all the cords and lap belts and everything were disconnected, which I did. But that put me about halfway out of the hole in the canopy. So I'm standing up there and said, well, it's not quite according to procedure, but let's press on. So I pushed my way out of the hole, pushed off to the right so I'd miss the tail, which it worked. So I'm outside the airplane now in kind of a flat spin, saying, what do I do next? Well, I looked down to try to find the D-ring, which is on the lap belt typically, rather than up here on your chest. So I looked down there, and I couldn't find the D-ring. So I went through the webbing and so forth. There it was in the middle, so I pulled that. Buddha was on my side. The parachute opened. So I had about 2 swings in the parachute, hit the ground, kind of backwards going up a hill where I hurt my back a bit. But it didn't slow me down much. So I grabbed my parachute, went up the hill, contacted Mark Diebold, who was on the radio. He had been kind of my mentor over the time I was there, and luckily he was on my side and there when all this happened. He had Air America inbound already. So I packed up my chute, went down the hill, pulled out my flare. You have a night flare and a day flare. Pull out the night flare so it would just give out a little smoke. I didn't want to have one of those big orange survival flare conflagrations going on because there was ground fire in the distance. Minimum notice was my idea. So Air America landed. They picked me up right away, took me to Long Tien, about 10 minutes away. They took me out in a helicopter, put me into Vopar, which is a old renovated C-45 with turboprops that Air America used. Had a big camera inside, so they stuffed me next to the camera, headed me down to Udorn, the next air base closest, and it took me into Udorn. Well, there I am. My clothes were burned off a bit, and I was a little bit banged up. So I said, sir, what happened to you? Well, we didn't have a cover story to cover this one, so I made up cover story that I'd been in a motorcycle accident. And I don't know if they believe me or not, but they bandaged me up, took some x-rays, found I had a compression fracture in my back. They decided that's why you're going home, son. So they put me on a 141 and I headed home. So I went back to flying after about 6 months. And I stayed in the Air Force for another 25 years.